Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two, and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode we are reading Starling House by Alix E. Harrow, up to but not including chapter 17. So Taylor, we went from cozy mystery to straight horror this month.
Yeah, although to be fair, this doesn't feel very horror-esque, I'd say.
I think we're probably going to get more into that this second half based on what we saw at the end of the first half.
Fair enough. Yeah. It definitely is gothic, I'll say, but yeah, it's not necessarily scary yet, so.
For sure. I think it's all that build up, all that sizzle.
Definitely. And definitely a shift, yeah, to your point from last month, but new year, same us.
Yes, exactly. I also like the light name connection to a book we did, I think 2 months ago. We went from Opaline to Opal.
Oh my god, you're so right. And also, this book has a book inside a book, which is the same of History of Wild Places.
Yeah.
They're quite similar, too.
I didn't even think about that. I've been making a lot of connections with this book and episode 13.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot to talk about it in regards to, the framing of the story and the format of the story. And kind of what's going on with all the different perspectives. But that's a theory conversation, probably best saved for the very end of this. So we'll just get into it and say our first person narrator is Opal. Opal, last name kind of unknown. She has many. She changes it. We know she is a high school dropout. Her mother's passed away. And she is taking care of her brother, Jasper, who at this point is 17, I think he is, or almost 17. So she's been doing this for a long time.
I think he's like a sophomore in high school. I was trying to figure it out. He must be like a sophomore in high school because I think, or maybe a junior. She wants to send them off to this other, I assume it's a boarding school based on the information. And something about it made me think that meant he had 2 years left, but I'm not sure that's ever confirmed. I may have just come up with that.
I think I remember a bit where she mentions packaging the admissions from that school and giving it as a 17th birthday present.
Oh yeah.
So I think he's a junior.
Oh man, it's kind of weird to go to a different a boarding school for just senior year.
Right. I'm confused why she's not just saving it for his college education type of situation.
Yeah, maybe she feels like he can't compete as much for college if he's stuck there.
I see. It becomes very clear, at least where we are in the book, that she is kind of starting to make choices for him and acting as his parent, and he does not like that very much.
Yeah, to include the fact that she wants to send him to this school and he has no idea.
Right, it's crazy.
I don't know why she wouldn't say.
It definitely seems like something you should ask if he wants to do, because he clearly has a different idea of what he wants to do. He makes his little films, which are kind of horror-esque, which are cool, but he's also applied for a job, right?
Right.
There's a big mining company in the town, Gravely something co. I don't remember what it's called. All that matters is it's owned.
I don't remember.
Yeah, all that matters is that it's owned by the Gravely family, which is a very long, old family, which we will talk a lot about within this episode. But he's applied for that company, and he seems well received. He gets an email from the HR being we should talk about this and figure this out. I'm assuming it's because his mom, which we can talk about as well.
I didn't even think about that. That's actually gotta be it.
For sure. But Opal sees the email and she deletes it and blocks that email address for him.
Meanwhile, she's in cahoots with this corporation thing. I got a little more frustrated with that connection. Yeah.
To be fair, she's being threatened.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that when it comes up. I'm frustrated with that whole situation.
It's kind of a mess. But it feels like Jasper, he obviously knows what Opal's doing, but he also wants her to tell him and be honest with him because he's not a child anymore, right?
Yeah.
He is basically an adult. And it seems like he's working towards something that she can't see yet. And I'm assuming that's going to be that he wants to take care of her as well. Why else would you get a job right out of high school? You you're living in a motel, you obviously need the money. He's trying to help you, and you're just can't see it.
I fully agree that I think that's what's happening in his head is he sees Opal is like out working all the time, and like with him not being direct about, or with her not being direct about it, she's just sending these text messages of like, oh, I'll be late, I'm staying extra, all this stuff, which I think Jasper would see as, oh, she's doing that to make us extra money because we don't have money. Like, I should do something too to support us. And I think that's part of it, is like he wants to be part of the decisions that lead to their own success, which to me means that when she comes out and is like, I've been doing all this not because we need it to sustain ourselves, but because I want to send you to school, he's going to be upset that he wasn't part of the decision making process for that. I think also that's part of why she's doing it, right? Of like, I don't want him to say no. Like, I don't want him to have a choice to say no to this when I think it's his way out of here. But they're not going to be aligned when the moment comes because she didn't find any way to include him in it.
Right. And I think this is touching a little bit on what we'll talk about later, but it's really interesting that they're at odds because, and if you've read the book, you'll understand what I mean, but there's a divide between them, even though they're family, which could reflect really well in regards to a divide between their last names and like what house has kind of taken them in.
Interesting, especially since he's engaging with the company.
Yes, yeah. And she's obviously found her home in a different house. So
yes, that's a good point.
I think unwillingly on his part, but I think there might be some conflict because of that whole old ass battle between those two families.
Yes. The other thing with Jasper, like I did get a little frustrated with his behavior towards the like last interactions they have with each other, and I think part of it is conditioned by what we're talking about with Opal's communication with him. Like he's kind of come to expect, right? Like they have the rule of, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to, which to be fair, I think is a good rule for life, but maybe not for the person who you're living with. And just, how she's a known liar basically. And she's comfortable with that. And he just doesn't seem to believe basically anything she says. Like I think there's all of these things conditioned to him to get really upset with her, and it makes sense. But on the other end of it, it did feel like Jasper was testing her in every conversation she had instead of just expressing what it is he was feeling and why. Like, I guess he was expressing what he was feeling. He was very disgruntled and making that clear. But there was like not really any actual conversation of like, this is how this could be fixed, which I think can come down to the fact that he's a teenager and hasn't had a good example from Opal.
That's true. Yeah, I think he's so used to her trying to fix their problems that if he said, I'm worried about you, or I want this job so I can help support us, she would like stuff herself into whatever box needed to make sure he had to step up. Like, she's so willing to mask anything she's going through. And like, because she's a liar, he just expects her to do that. So like talking to her is just so difficult.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't feel like they can have an honest conversation because she's only going to care about taking care of him, and he like can't get her to understand that he is like a human adult, almost an adult.
Yeah, basically though.
Yeah, who could possibly also want to take care of her.
I'll try not to keep adding more things to this conversation, but he ends up at his friend Logan's house and she just goes and picks him up, and I was like, he's 16. Like, I feel like you don't do that anymore at 16.
Yeah, their relationship is it's actually quite toxic, to be honest. Like, it sounds wrong to say that because they obviously love each other a lot, but she is taking on this role she's not supposed to take, and the reason she took it is because of what she needed, right? Like, her mom just died, and it wasn't about making sure Jasper was okay. It was about making sure she could get out of bed every day and have a reason to keep living. And depending on somebody like that, like, it's not about Jasper being happy so much. It's kind of about using him as a reason to keep going, whether he's happy or not. I
mean, I feel like actual parents do that too, honestly. Like, they end up putting a lot on their kids because of it.
Yeah, so that's just, he's under a lot of pressure. Like, why do you think I work so hard at school? Like, why do you think I do as well as I do? Like, right. I imagine all of that kind of educational pressure is also because he wants to make their lives better.
Right.
But obviously we've kind of left them at a pretty bad spot. I think Jasper right now is staying with the Logans.
Probably for the better, honestly. At least for whatever's happening right now.
Definitely. Because he's confronted her basically about working at the Starling House. And the Starling House is this mysterious house in the town that nobody's like ever seen or gone into, and random people show up and claim they're a Starling. And right now, the heir of the house is, we don't actually, most of the town doesn't know his name. It's Alexander Starling, it's something else Starling, but his actual name is Arthur, who is our other main character, I guess. We get third person POV of what he's got going on. So
I didn't even notice there was a person shift when that happens. Like you're saying, it was first person with Opal and third with him.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even notice that.
You didn't notice the whole time?
I don't know how I didn't notice that.
That's crazy.
I agree. I think it's really cool when it switches over to Arthur, I have to say, though. Like, when it's, like, the middle of the chapter and they're in the same place, and then it's just, like, I could just see the TV camera panning in my head from, like, being behind, maybe more like a video game, from, like, being behind Opal to being behind Arthur. And I'm like, whoa, I love that we're in the same scene still, but we're getting a totally new perspective and new thoughts.
I feel like sometimes when the perspective shifts, it can feel like a cheap way to give more information about what's going on. I feel like I've seen that come up in books before. But in this, because of the format of the book feeling very intentional, like, it really does only add to the storytelling aspect of what's going on. And I also like that it's not first person from Arthur's point of view. Like, I don't know the reason for it yet.
I mean, is it just because of who presumably wrote all this?
I would assume so.
Like, just because I would think Opal wrote this, and therefore it's first person for her.
Yeah, but then that begs the question, like, why didn't Arthur write his own? Oh no, I just had a thought. I just had a really bad thought.
Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking, like, why are there footnotes? We don't have to have this conversation right now if you want to hold off. But, like, why are there footnotes, right? Like, why is that information not just in the story itself? So
yeah. Regardless, I guess, he seems very closed off, cold. He's actually kind of just like an anxious, upset guy. Pretty normal.
And fair, given his past.
Yeah, his relationship to the house is obviously very tumultuous, I guess. There are multiple scenes in which he kind of just beats up the house because he's upset with it. But it's like, he was born there, obviously. He's kind of the only Starling that was.
Yeah, like born into the family, grew up with it, and then took it on.
Right. And then he obviously didn't want it, though, right? Like, he wanted to leave. He did go to high school outside, in the outside world, he says, which is a little weird. Because he also ran away once. And something terrible happened when he did. Like, a turbine exploded, and I think 4 people died. And then also, I think he thinks he caused Opal's mother to die as well in a car accident. Because he feels guilty when they first see each other, and he obviously recognizes her.
Yeah, I remember thinking the guilty thing was weird. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so he obviously feels trapped in the house, and like he has a responsibility, and he can't let other people into it. But obviously Opal is different.
Yeah, I kind of got the vibe he knew, like, that the house was choosing her, and that's why he leaned into it.
Yeah, he definitely knew the house wanted her, but he didn't really want to accept that at first, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because being chosen by the house isn't necessarily a good thing. Like, he grew up watching his mother being chosen by the house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's brutal. The house, or what's in the house, eventually kills you. It kills everybody.
And I think it's an interesting feature that the house has chosen her, because I think he's kind of forced himself upon the house a bit, right? Of like he kind of made himself warden, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't seem like the house dislikes him for it, per se. I mean, I do think it's a strained relationship, but like the house is not like, I feel like Arthur tends to be the aggressor here.
Yeah, the house is supposedly his birthright, according to his mother, because he's in a very unique position. But yeah, he doesn't, to my knowledge, go through what typical wardens go through in regards to being chosen. So he's kind of just doing it, I guess, until Opal gets there.
And I guess because he thinks he can stop it for some reason.
It's confusing. But he does offer her a job to clean the house because he's kind of let it become filthy because he hates it. Saying it's because of guilt, which I think is partially true, but he also later says it's just because he's lonely, which I think also makes sense. Like, you can only go so long being alone in that kind of situation before you just want somebody else to be around, you know?
And she's the only one who's been able to get in there, right? Like, so it's like he doesn't even have the choice as much to think about, like, oh, like, should I bring someone into these gates so that way I have a friend? Like, is that okay? It's like, well, like, she kind of got herself in there, so that's an option. Like, she's probably gonna keep bothering you whether or not you accept her. So
yeah,
so it's probably worth it, and then you have a friend.
Yeah, because it's obviously he's protecting, I think, two different areas. There's the beasts that are around that he has to take care of, but he also walks the walls and, like, makes sure the wards are okay. So I think it's also about keeping other people out of the house, which those other people are probably members of the Gravely family or their associates. Yeah. So, like, he really can't trust anybody. Opal seems like the best bet because she was chosen by the house, but that doesn't really work out for them either, all things considered. But I don't know if he realizes who she is.
In what sense? Like, as far as the Gravely connection?
Yeah.
I don't see why he would.
I don't know. I feel like anybody with red hair is a Gravely within this book. Like, it's the only thing that ties all of their characters together.
Honestly, I didn't even pay attention to the red-haired part when it came to the Gravely's being explained.
Oh, that's
so that's a good point. But I think we're probably supposed to suspend some disbelief on that, because I think other people would have said something by now, maybe to even include Opal herself.
Yeah, but it's weird when Eden is like a town that ignores all of the bad things that happen in it.
I don't know. Kind of gives a Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, in what way?
Where, like, the vibe is like the horrible things are happening all the damn time in the town that they're in, but, like, because of there's like some magical aura over the town that makes people ignore how horrible it is, because any sane person would have moved out.
Oh, I see. Like The Mist and Percy Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Opal gets pretty close with the house, also gets pretty close with Arthur. Don't know how I feel about that relationship, but we'll let it simmer.
Hasn't been too aggressive, so.
Yeah, it's okay right now. But obviously, the Graveleys just cannot mind their own fucking business. So Opal gets approached by an Elizabeth Bain, and she's basically asked / threatened to take photos and give information about Starling House. It seems fine at first. It's like, oh, there's property lines we need to go over. And it's like, okay, that's boring, but nothing nefarious right now. And then it moves to, actually, there's some, like, anomalies going on, and we need to figure out what's happening. And it's like, oh, okay, mysticism.
I think they warmed her up a little bit to get there, right? Like, I think they didn't want to ask for too much too fast and scare her off, even though it seems like they have plenty of blackmail to keep her in order.
Yeah, they're blackmailing her with her real age, with her brother, like, literally stalking her brother and sending pictures of him, like...
Very concerning.
Yeah, giving her money, which is fine. She can at least pretend for a little bit she's just doing it for the money, but no, she's in a very bad position with Bane. And Bane obviously knows way more about Opal's connection with Gravely, hinting that, like, a Mr. Gravely must be worried about Opal or something to that effect. And that's kind of when you're like, oh, okay, maybe her father was a Gravely, which is what I first thought.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. I had also briefly thought that maybe Jasper's dad was a Gravely until they said more about him, but same vibe.
Yeah, but then we get confirmation, we've gotten confirmation where we stopped in the book, that it was their mother that was a Gravely.
Can we just go back one step for a second to the moment where Opal decides she's going to get in that car with Bane and her crew? Because the fact that she did that, it still doesn't process for me. Like, that's maybe one of the things in the book that makes the least sense to me, like, why she would get in the car. And, like, her reasoning was basically, like, it doesn't seem like the sort of thing you say no to. And I understand she was on foot, so she was, like, in somewhat of a vulnerable position of, like, they can just keep following her. But at a certain point, I would think she would run away or do something, you know? As opposed to get in the car. Like, I feel like that's where, if she had not gotten in the car, she would still have a fighting chance. But because she got in the car, it was like, that's it, it's over.
I don't know, because I think, like, within her brain at any moment, she's thinking about how to survive a situation and most importantly, how to protect her brother. So I think she's more willing to just go along with things if it means minimizing conflict.
I guess that's fair.
Yeah, I think getting in the car was like the easiest option because they weren't going to give up. They were going to keep bothering her.
That's true.
And they were probably just going to do it more aggressively.
Yeah, especially given what they ended up with.
Yeah, Bane has gotten way more aggressive since we've gone through the book. Instead of just saying, you should look for the cellar, it's now, you have 3 days to find the cellar. Like, it's gotten way more intense. So...
Yeah, and she showed up at Jasper's school.
Yeah, fucking creepy as hell.
That was crazy. Yeah, these people definitely should not be trusted. Like, they are very scary.
Yeah, it's also like tying back to Opal and Jasper. Maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like I would tell Jasper about this. Like, I get not wanting to worry him, but he needs to be careful, right? Like,
right, yeah.
He has no choice. He is now wrapped up in this. He should know what is going on.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, especially because he is so upset when he finds out something is going on.
Right.
Because he finds out this way.
Yeah, and it's entirely possible that Bane and Gravely will use that tension to bring Jasper in closer, which will push Opal into doing something she doesn't want to do, and it'll just become an entire mess.
I think that's a good point. I don't like that idea.
Yeah.
I think I don't like it because it almost seems likely like that's what's going to happen especially if it leans further into the rift.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like a miscommunication, omission type of trope. Pretty classic.
Yeah. You see it all over. That's what it did feel like in the moment. And that's maybe why I got so frustrated, like I was talking earlier about Jasper's communication, because I'm like, man, this feels like one of those situations where, like, if we just said what we were thinking, maybe we'd solve problems, but we're not doing that. We're just, I don't know, being reactive and running away.
He's at least a teenager. That's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess you could argue Opal also, she's doing the grown-up things and, like, taking care of somebody and getting money and all of that kind of stuff, but she really wasn't allowed to grow up properly, so...
Yeah, for sure.
She's not in a healthy mindset either, to be fair. And neither is Arthur. Let's just be frank. None of these people are healthy individuals.
That's also a good point. It's literally every single character, every main character is in like a very weird, unique situation that has affected the great deal of their childhoods.
Yeah.
Also, like, her only friend seems to be Charlotte. Like, she's managed all this time without any of her own friends, really, too. She's got like some cordial relationship with Lacey from her first job, but doesn't seem anything she really values. Like, Charlotte's the only one she values, and like definitely the relationship with Bev is a mess. So it's just like every relationship Opal has is not good, and then Arthur doesn't have them. Jasper's the only one who actually has friends.
She obviously just feels so disconnected from everything, and it's tough because she's going through something difficult and nobody was there for her, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, partially because she took on this burden by herself and, like, pushed for it. But also, she mentioned so many times how Eden, and I think Charlotte mentions as well, Eden just wants to cover things up. Like, they don't want to deal with the bad parts of themselves.
I mean, it's a bit of small town vibes, right? Like, I don't know, maintain status quo and don't make waves or everyone will know, There's not that many of them, so...
Yeah, so she doesn't want to owe anybody, so she can't have, like, a relationship with somebody, because she would think any act of kindness is, like, owing them. She has a little bit of that with Arthur for a while, when he, like, gives her the coat and, like, the truck. Crazy.
That was crazy.
I mean, he can't leave, so who else is going to use it, I guess, but...
It's fair, but, like, it's immediately recognized.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, she's a little too chill about accepting all those gifts, I think, sometimes. Like, it's obvious that he's being kind, but I feel like her mentality of not wanting to owe people is getting a little bit lost. And I don't know if it's, like, organically enough that it is, if that makes sense.
Oh, fair. Yeah, but maybe that's to be chalked up to, like, there's an allure about Arthur because he's kind of a mysterious man. So, like, this is, like... her feeling like she's getting in a little bit.
Right. Yeah, and I guess you can only reject kindness so many times, which she does, and then eventually she accepts.
Yeah. I think like the coat, that was the first gift. So to me, it's like fine, it makes sense. I think that would be noticed too, so she has to think about that. But I think it makes sense for her to accept it. The truck, like in any other context, is like don't do that. That's too dang much. But she does feel threatened, right? She was followed while she was on foot. I think she's like, no, like I kind of need this so that way I can feel safe.
Crazy. She gets the truck. Her brother is like, where the fuck did you get this truck at? And she still decides to lie.
Yeah, dude.
But getting back to research, I think the most important conversation to be had about this entire book, which we've kind of skirted around and been very ominous about, I guess, is...
No more ominous than the book itself.
For sure. Is Starling House itself, and what it is, and how it formed, and also what the Underland is. That whole history, we're just gonna get our way through it, and it's gonna be very complicated. And there was a lot of information in the book, and a lot of names, and a lot of dates, and I'm ignoring all of them. It's too much. Basically, what we need to know is Eleanor Starling is the first Starling, also the builder of the Starling House.
Right.
And then once she disappeared, because she did disappear, somebody would just show up, or a family would just show up and claim they were a Starling, and the gates would open, and that would be that. They would be a Starling at that point.
It was interesting the way that was described at the beginning of at the beginning of the book, where they say, oh, like it seems like impossible for a local person to marry into that family, as though like that's what was happening. Like the assumption of the locals was that someone still lived there to marry. But I think we come to find that it's like, no, those people just all died and someone else took their spot.
Yeah, I think they're thinking normally, this is like, what happens in reality, in which there is like a clear blood lineage of something, which is what the Graveleys have done, right? But the Starlings is so, like, mystical in the way it's formed, which obviously fits with what's going on over there, but obviously they don't understand. Like, Eden does not understand what any of that means.
They're just giving this story that makes the most sense to it, because it's like an Occam's razor situation of like, well, this is got to be what it is, because anything more complicated than that doesn't make any sense.
Right. And the idea of Starling House kind of has a folklore attached to it a little bit. We get like an example of that when Bev tells the story of Eleanor Starling and everything like that, because they speak about her in a very folkloric way. Like, she was a dishonest woman that tempted one of the Graveleys, and then he died, and blah 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 blah. Like, very it is a story more so than the other stories are.
I agree. And that one frustrated me because they really like trash talk the heck out of Eleanor. not because I do think she is a bit suspicious in multiple tellings of the story for sure. So I get why there'd be folklore around it, but like in this version of the story that Bev tells, she's like, yeah, like the oldest brother died. And so a few weeks later, it was announced that Eleanor was engaged to the second oldest brother. And I'm so sorry, I don't remember anyone's name, but so the second oldest brother is engaged. We think that Eleanor like killed the oldest brother and then threatened the second oldest brother, and that is why they are threatened him to like engage her. And that is why they're getting engaged so quickly after the death of the first one, which I just thought was, this is now the opposite of Occam's razor. I thought that was a much more complicated explanation than the second oldest brother killed the oldest one because he wanted Eleanor and the oldest brother was a threat.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like that would have made a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. I would also like to say the second oldest brother, I think, was 45 when he married Eleanor, and she was a girl, right? Like, she was a young woman. So, like, the idea of the oldest brother wanting to marry this girl is crazy to me.
Yeah.
But also, it's like the 1880s, so I suppose
yeah,
it was happening.
Yep.
But yeah, Eleanor in that version of the story is kind of spoken as misfortune upon the Gravely family. Like, the oldest brother, the middle brother, and then like 20 years later, the youngest Gravely also ends up mysteriously dying for some reason, and that's when Eleanor disappears. So like, that folklore of it is already setting up that kind of battle between Starling and Gravely, but it very much paints the Graveleys as the victim in all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Eleanor as something more ethereal and like evil, I guess.
Yeah, it was just that whole story was like giving like it couldn't possibly be the man; it had to be the
Yeah.
woman. But I guess it makes sense with like when we get to the later tellings of the story, like you start to figure out more about the dirt behind the Graveleys, and probably was to their benefit that the version of the story that got out there was it painted them in the victim side.
Right. So speaking of those other stories, we might as well combine them, I guess, because I think the Boone story, Arthur's information, and then the Underland itself, which is kind of an autobiography, all of them are pretty much the same in regards to what happened and how the Starling story actually went. Nathaniel obviously gives us more backstory on the Graveleys themselves, which is, you know, they were using slave labor to gain their fortune, and we're sending men into the mines, and Nathaniel is one such person who dug too far into the mine and entered what he called hell. And that's also when the mist rose for the first time in Eden. So obviously they fell into some kind of other world, and when that happened, that's when the oldest Gravely died. Eleanor wasn't involved. According to her story, she was kind of abandoned in the woods when she was a baby and was found, I'm not sure if immediately by the Gravely family or something happened to that effect. My cat just sneezed.
Is that what that was?
Yeah. And so she was kind of raised in the Gravely family and then ended up engaged to the second brother. I mentioned the age gap, and it seems like she was groomed, to be honest.
Yeah.
And she did not want to marry him. She was going to kill herself. But Nathaniel stopped her and told her about the Underland, which she named the Underland. But he told her about it, how to get there, and she went, and her husband died. So it's weird because it's doing good things. It's killing bad people.
It's interesting because of the Underland story, like how she talks about Nora Lee going down there and basically having a conversation with like the creatures down there and convincing them, maybe a little indirectly, but convincing them to do something about the bad man on the surface. So meanwhile, like in the present, we're seeing what appears to be a generations-long battle against these beasts, like as though they are just innately vicious and just kill whatever they get to, as opposed to like being careful and like there's a target, there's a specific reason. At least that's how they're presented. Like that gives me the idea that there's probably a specific reason they're doing all of this. But there's a contrast between the Nora Lee and the Underland versus what we see with Arthur.
She was obviously studying what was going on, and we get some information on that. But also, she always considered the Underland to still be almost a home for her. Like, she fit in there. She felt like she was also one of the beasts. And at first, I thought like her talking to them and getting them to do what she wanted was almost like a devil's deal. Like, maybe she made some kind of deal with them. If the beasts are being controlled specifically by like unrighted wrongs and things like that, or even just an animosity towards the Gravely family in general, which, to be honest, they all seem evil as hell, then maybe they're still trying to do that, but that reasoning has kind of been lost to time. And so you have Starlings that are like protecting them by stopping the beasts unintentionally. Or maybe there's just too much fallout, right? Like maybe what Eleanor did had catastrophic results for the town, and that wasn't the purpose of it, right? Like, she wanted to kill certain people, but too many people were getting hurt, and so they have to kind of mitigate that damage, almost. I could see maybe that being the reason. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to see what's going on.
Yeah, because also, like, the sense I'm getting with, you know, the conversation in the car about, you know, the rate of bad things happening in Eden is 2 to 3 times the national average, whatever, is like things getting out of hand, right? Like the beasts getting free or something, right? Like it seems like their job is almost to contain the Underland, so like they're just getting free and causing havoc. Like I don't know, it seems unexplained. I'm struggling to come up with a specific theory, like build my own idea of what is actually happening or what the actual reason for that behavior is.
Right. I think it's weird because Eleanor uses the Underland and sees it as like a safe place for herself. Even possibly disappears there at the end, which I think might be likely. But she does things to block the exit, like keep the Underland contained, because she builds the Starling House.
Oh, and the lock that's not supposed to be opened.
Right, which I'm thinking is a door that leads to, not necessarily to like keep people from going through it, but to keep things from the Underland from coming out of it. Because I think the entrance is down the river through the mines, and that's like open. People can go there. They'll die, but they can go there, right?
Right.
But the house was specifically built in this area and built in a very specific way, in which it was like kind of like the Winchester house, if anybody is familiar with that. Do you know what the Winchester house is?
Nope.
Okay, it's like a house somewhere in California. I don't remember. There was a woman, Sarah Winchester, who like lost basically all of her family, but her family was part of the people that made like the Winchester guns, you know?
I don't know. The Winchester guns, I don't think I know what that is.
Oh, it's a type of gun. It's okay.
All right. Cool.
But the idea was that she was being haunted by a lot of spirits that were like upset because of the amount of people that had been killed by those guns, whatever. And so she built her house kind of insanely, like staircases that go to nowhere, doors that open to the outside on like the second story, weird towers, seance rooms. Like it's a labyrinth of a house, right? And it's supposed to keep spirits kind of lost in it in a way to keep her safe. That's one of the theories. The other theory is she just liked architecture. What can you say?
That one's not as fun.
Yeah, for sure. But the Starling House reminded me of that.
For sure. Yeah, it sounds a lot like it.
Yeah, it also gets likened to Crete and like the Minotaur in the labyrinth. So obviously the house was built to kind of distract and like keep contained whatever is inside. And the only thing inside is that locked door where I'm supposing beasts from the Underland can leave.
Because we also hear like a creature on the other side of the door or something.
We do. But why? The why is the question.
Like, why keep them in, or like, why have this access point?
I mean, I think the access point is inevitable. It is kind of like a why keep them in. Are the shadow mist beasts different from whatever is in the Underland?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, there are some things getting out. If the shadow mists are the same thing, whatever.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking maybe they were coming out from the mine access point. But I don't know, like, I don't know where that is in relation to the house. Like, they seem to... I don't know if they target the house or not, actually. I just assume they do because Arthur's there fighting them.
I think the mine is only an entrance. Because when Nathaniel falls in, he exits by the river, which is where Starling House would be. And then the same with Eleanor. When she goes in, she exits somewhere else.
That makes sense. I mean, it's a river. A flowing river. Are these even, like, physical beasts, though? Like, that was the other thing. Like, what level of magic are we working with here?
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like the story has done a good job of setting up unknowns for us. I think I am having more trouble coming up with what to predict for the second half of this book than I have for other books.
Right. Which is really interesting because there's a lot of things that are very familiar about the story. Like, you know, Crete and the Winchester house. And then also the Underland kind of being similar to like the Hollow Earth theory and like just all of the mythos coming into play as being part of this story would make you think you know what's happening. But like, I do think there's some weird flip that's supposed to happen where it's like, it's not the beasts that are the problem necessarily, but it's like, it's the Graveleys, right? It's like whatever they want to do is probably the actual evil here.
It seems like a lot of the things they've done have been kind of evil, so...
Well, yeah.
It would line up. The Gravely thing is interesting too. I noticed there was a couple of times they mentioned how they live like right outside of Eden and not technically in Eden, and when they're there, they're only briefly there. So I was almost wondering if there's like a curse aspect to this that's caused the Underland to behave this way, where they are really targeting the Graveleys, but they can only do so when they're in town or something.
It definitely seems possible.
But then it's so interesting for the house to choose Opal, who's also a Gravely, like a reuniting of these two potentially disputing families, right? Because now we've got Arthur, who's like kind of actually a Starling, and then we've got Opal, who's actually a Gravely, coming together when it seems like their families have been spatting.
I think like symbolically it could make sense if we're doing like a full circle moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because Eleanor is like technically a Starling that became a Gravely, or actually she was raised as a Gravely, kind of, and then she took the last name Starling. So like her and Opal are very similar. So if we're going like a full circle, close the loop, like stylistically, that makes sense. It's also quite clear, we've talked about a little like before, but like Arthur, while he was born in the Starling House, he's not necessarily a warden of the house. Like, I don't remember him having any of the dreams you're supposed to have to become a Starling.
Exactly.
He just assumes he's a warden because his mother told him it was his birthright and he was raised to be kind of a warden.
That's why I say they kind of forced it, yeah.
Yeah, but his mother mentions very clearly, like, in a letter that was left to Arthur, that it seems like the house might be getting weaker because it's waiting for its heir. But she doesn't assume that heir is Arthur, so we're obviously waiting for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see Opal reflecting Eleanor kind of being that heir character, and that's why the house has been so intense.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Seems dangerous, though, because if, like, whatever this curse is that these beasts are supposed to target Graveleys, like, they've got a pretty good track record, and now there's still two Graveleys in town between Opal and Jasper.
Yeah. I wonder if that's necessary, though, because if Eleanor set up this kind of deal being, like, kill the Graveleys, it just in the general sense, and that's what the beasts have been doing this entire time, with, like, other people getting hurt in the process, then maybe, like, Opal being a Starling and a Gravely is a way to, like, reset that deal, or, like, kind of change how things are working at the moment. Because Eleanor is still influencing everything.
Yeah, it's like kind of Opal is being chosen to continue, in a way, continue on as Eleanor and change the direction that things are going.
Right, I think so.
Which means she's going to have, if that's the case, if we like run with this, she's going to have to go interface with these beasts.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. I also am concerned that this means Jasper is at risk, though. Speaking of Graveleys being targeted, like I wonder if the beasts will target Jasper, and that will like be the real motivator for Opal to like fix it.
Well, actually, I think he's already been targeted
by the beasts.
Yeah, I think there was a very small section that mentions it, like a moment of bad luck, because Opal thinks like her family is cursed with bad luck. I think they are as Graveleys. I think ironically their mother thought she was very lucky, and I guess she was until it ran out. But Jasper, when he was like in the 5th grade or something like that, I think they said, part of the ceiling fell down.
That's a good point.
They had thought it, like, an animal had died up there because of the rot. And we've seen, we can assume, but also we've seen that the beasts cause things to rot. So I think they were targeting him specifically.
Man, that's a good point. Okay, so he is at risk, basically.
Which is, a great reason to tell him everything happening.
Yeah, it is. It is a really good reason to tell him. It is, I would say then that their mom was lucky because she lasted a long time relative to being targeted as a 5th grader.
That makes her... That's very curious, though, that the reason... Like, why did she stay in Eden, then?
Do you think she knew?
I don't know. I mean, it is important to note that the mother had plans in place. Like, she has a deal with Bev saying, my children will live here for nothing.
Yeah.
She must have known eventually something would happen.
She's at risk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to know, and we know so little about like the connection with the Gravely family. Like, I mean, even down to the question of why are they poor if they are Graveleys, right? Like, what led to the disconnect of family, and and certainly the lack of inheritance or anything, right? Like they clearly don't talk to the Gravely. She doesn't really use the Gravely last name, even keeps it from her daughter. So there's definitely some family history we're not getting that it prevents us from knowing for sure how much she knows and why they are in the situation they're in. But I think based on this, it makes sense that she does know something, and that I'm like, is that the reason why she is estranged from the family? She's like, I don't want to be associated with that. She seems pretty okay with her life, you know, like she doesn't seem actually that upset that they're poor. That's something that Opal gets upset about as she grows up. But the mom is like pretty chill.
I think it's also interesting that the Underland book that Opal has belonged to the mom first. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if the mom knew way more than we thought.
Yeah, because she also has that deal, right? You mentioned the deal with Bev. Like, what's that about, too? Because I definitely think it has something to do with that family connection. But then Bev also has seemingly limited information, well, definitely faulty information about the Starling House. So I don't know. It's like, I don't really know what Bev knows. I kind of assume she knows something more about the Graveleys. Oh, the other reason was because she brings them up. Opal brings up the Graveleys, I think. And Bev is like, you don't need to know anything more about that. So I was like, okay, well, now Bev is keeping the secret then.
Yeah. I wonder if Bev knows that they're Graveleys and is like, had been told by the mother, like, one day you'll get paid back for this, or
right, because knowing that for sure, like Bev would be like, why can't I get money from them then?
Very weird. Honestly, I don't know how many people assume, like, I know I made the red hair comment earlier, but like the way Bev speaks about the Graveleys to Opal and the way Charlotte is so willing to talk about the Graveleys to Opal, I really do think a lot of people at least assume, right? At least assume that Opal must be a Gravely.
Yeah, I guess I could see that, especially with Charlotte, that they may just be trying to lead her down that investigation path because they think it's the case and they want to know too.
Right. And then like small town vibes, maybe because she's like a bastard or the mom gave up the name, like Opal isn't actually worth anything, technically.
Yeah, because she does have that thought when she figures it out of like, maybe this is how we're going to get some money out of this. And it's like, oh, I don't know if that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, because Bane makes the comment like, Mr. Gravely is worried about you for a while. And it's like, has he? Because he hasn't done anything, right?
Right,
like,
she's right here.
Yeah, you haven't done anything to help her. So obviously, I think the Graveleys would care conditionally. So I think that kind of ties up everything. Question mark? We've skimmed over a lot of things. But just know what we have researched by reading this book is also being researched by Eleanor at one point and Arthur within the present moment. So it seems like Arthur at least knows, I mean, probably more than us, but also is just as confused as us, to be fair. He kind of has his own plans as to what he wants to do, which we've discussed a little bit, and in the way that we're not sure how any of that makes sense. But I think if he's been battling the beasts, he probably has the assumption that they need to be stopped in some capacity. I don't know how that happens. That's what he's doing, but I don't know.
I don't think the answer is kill them all. So I don't know either.
And then the other one is like, can you 100% seal the door in some way? That feels more like a magical answer. I don't know if we've gotten any hints of that, especially because we know he's trying to open the door.
Yeah, it's very confusing, right? Like, why, if the beasts are a problem, like, there's clearly beasts on the other side of this door, why are we trying to open it? Or, like, is this not, I don't know, I was like, is this not the Underland? Like, is this another world? But it seems like they're connected based on the previous story, so I really don't know what the motivation is for the last key.
Right, because there's the three main keys, which don't matter in regards to, like, the house can open the doors anyway, so they really are for, like, human use. But there is the mysterious fourth key, which he thinks doesn't exist, and we know because of the Underland that it's buried under a sycamore tree. Crazy that, like, he doesn't know that's where it is when it's in Eleanor Starling's book.
So this is the thing, like, does he not know that? Like, I think if it comes to the second half of the book that he just doesn't know that line exists, I think I'm going to be dissatisfied because that seems like the obvious literature to be familiar with, right? He's clearly doing lots of reading, lots of research. I think he must know that, and there must be some trick about it. Like, it must not it must be metaphorical or a puzzle or a riddle or something. Like, I don't think it can be as simple as there's a sycamore tree on the plot and I'm going to go under it. Or for that matter, maybe there just isn't a sycamore tree on the plot, or there used to be and we don't know where it was. Like something like that. I would take that, but it can't be that he doesn't know.
I could also believe like maybe somehow the fourth key got stolen, maybe by a Gravely.
Oh, that's a good point.
And that's why like they want to get back onto the property and stuff like that.
Yeah. That is a great point, actually. I would believe that for sure because they are so invested in knowing more about the property.
And the cellar in particular. Like Bane pushes a lot for the basement and trying to find the way to the basement.
Yeah, and I guess I haven't really thought about what the motivation is on their end beyond like maybe they're trying to end whatever curse they think they're experiencing, but I don't see why that would lead to like a lack of cooperation. I guess because they don't trust the Starlings, right? Like and like Arthur isn't exactly an easily accessible member of society, but I don't know. It just seems weird. Like, where do they not align? Like, if they're both aligned on the idea of we need to make this stop happening, then nothing's wrong, right? Like, let's make it happen.
Right. Maybe it's like a simple, what does ending it mean? Like for corporate greed side, does that mean taking advantage of this entire world and these beasts and like turning it into some kind of profit, into something else? Or with the Starlings, like do you contain the Underland to protect people, but also protect the Underland? Maybe it's just a morality divide.
I guess also does ending whatever's happening like leave the Gravely's unchecked? If Arthur is successful in stopping this war from happening, it sounds like it's probably a good thing for the casual member of Eden, but does that kind of take away any fears that the Gravely's have and let them run off and do a lot more terrible things? I'm sure they're actively doing terrible things now too. So like I feel like the Gravely motivation, or like I feel like the Gravely's doing bad things has to play a part in this too, and I definitely can't figure out how to stack up against. I think I don't fully understand their motivation, what it is, what outcome they desire, but I'm not convinced it's a profit thing. But on the other hand, like I don't understand how getting involved helps them continue doing bad. I guess I don't see how it's stopping them from doing bad things now, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right. To be fair, I don't think the Underland will be completely contained in any way. We kind of get hints of that with our footnote writer mentioning a current warden. So obviously somebody is continuing the work. So whatever is happening in Starling House is still happening to some capacity.
Unless it means something different at this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange because the footnotes also mention people coming into the house and like certain
I was like, maybe it's
artists.
a museum or something.
Yeah, I think that's possible. So it could mean warden and like the actual term warden, where it's just somebody that takes care of the house and like upkeeps it and things like that.
Yeah.
I will also say the footnotes don't give a name for who this warden is, but they do mention Opal by name. I can't remember if they mention Arthur. So I'm very curious who this warden is.
Yeah, if it's not Opal.
I'm like, is it Jasper? Are we getting a Jasper warden?
I think that's so unlikely.
Damn.
I'm like, I think maybe it's Opal and they just didn't say her name in that case. Like, I think I don't know, Jasper seems like really unlikely. Unless, at best, it's Jasper if Opal's dead.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that.
That's the only way I think it's even possible.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like what Opal wants to do with her life, but I don't know if we've gotten any hint of that.
Well, yeah, what happens when Jasper goes off to college or school or whatever? Like, what is she going to get up to?
Right, because I could see like a universe where they handle whatever and then her and Arthur travel off together because they want to see the world type of situation. And so they would need another warden to take care of the house. But like, yeah, I don't know if Opal wants to do any of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of talk about getting out of town, right?
Yeah, but that's like from a survivalist point of view.
That's fair. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the point of the book for her to stick around.
Yeah, and it also, she's saying that about Jasper, but do we know if Jasper wants to leave?
No, we don't, for sure. I mean, there was kind of an illusion during their arguments that he has a plan, right?
Right.
And like she says, like, oh, like I'm gonna get you out of here if you just give me time, and he like his reaction is like a "you don't understand me" reaction.
Yeah, so that would be really interesting.
And then if that's the case, then maybe he's the warden. Then maybe I'll give it to you. But
yeah, I just think there's something about the films he makes. Like, they're kind of weird and haunting, and they, like, have the mist in them, and, like,
Yeah,
he
that's
doesn't
true.
necessarily see the beasts, but, like, I don't know, he gives off that energy.
So you think he's got a connection?
I think he does.
Do you think he's having the dreams too? Do you think like something like that could influence his videos?
Maybe. That's a good point. I mean, she's dreaming specifically of the house, but he might be having dreams of his own.
Maybe of the Underland or the beasts, yeah.
Yeah.
It would make sense for him to be connected to this too.
For sure. So then last little theory, which honestly, I don't know if we'll get an answer for this. I feel like we should at some point.
Hopefully enough information to be pretty sure at least.
Yeah, and we've talked about like the intentional format of this book, kind of the framing of it with the first person, third person. But it does bring into question who is writing these footnotes, who is possibly compiling all of these accounts into a book. I think we're on the same page in this.
Yeah. But funny enough, with the Jasper talk we just had, I initially thought it might be him, but it just, with the research/writing aspect of it, I think Charlotte makes the most sense.
Yeah, like we do hear about Charlotte. She came to Eden to write a book, and she is, for the most part, Opal's closest friend, as weird as that may seem. So, it would make sense for her to be the one doing all of this. Also, if I'm remembering, the footnote about Opal and calling her a liar is about the library, isn't it? Opal mentioned something about printing or something to that effect, and then the note is like, this is false. Opal went to the library between these dates and printed out these pages. So Opal must be telling the story to Charlotte to compile it. I'm assuming the Arthur thing, like, bit in third person, maybe Opal was telling it for him for some reason, or I don't know. That part is still a little strange.
Yeah, to me, it could explain that the reason it could be a point of evidence that Opal's the one who wrote it because she's not writing it in first person. But I think it's weird that she would know what she needed to know to write those third person parts. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we also have like these images in the book. Sometimes they're little, like, I don't want to call them doodles. They're actually just drawings, but they're smaller, like a vase of flowers, and like. Mm-hmm. Then we also have the full page images that are very similar to how Arthur draws. Like, they're in black and white. They're kind of, like, scratched and, like, sketches. So it seems like Arthur's the one drawing everything. But I guess, like, when does this happen? He could be drawing these while the story is going on. Because Arthur's probably dead at the end of this book.
Stop.
Or maybe he's trapped in the Underland.
Oh, God. I don't know if I like that either.
Yeah, maybe they're both trapped in the Underland, and that's how they're keeping it contained, and so the warden is somebody else.
Do you think they have to fight Eleanor?
Nah, I think Eleanor's dead. Do you think she's on the other side of the door?
Maybe. I kind of thought, I don't know. I guess if we think she ran off down there, I don't know if time works the same in the Underland. Again, we don't know the magic levels, but maybe not. It doesn't seem like it'd be super... I don't really know what to expect from this book. I'm like, it doesn't seem like it'd be logical for that to be the case, but the book has... It's done a good job of keeping me curious. I have no idea where it's going to go with that.
Yeah, to be fair, it is fantasy. Like, sometimes you get magical realism and it tries to be realistic.
Yeah, not this.
Yeah, it's great so far.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this book, and the feeling I'm getting while reading this book is, I think, the feeling I got from reading books as a kid, and I feel like I haven't felt that in a while.
That's crazy. /pause. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like I've been looking for that for a while. I think that's been part of the journey with this podcast is like, how do I get back that feeling I got, when I was like super into reading in middle school, especially. So this seems to really like check the box.
Oh, that's great.
Hopefully it sticks the second half. I'd hate to be disappointed because I am really liking it.
Yeah. As always, if you have your own thoughts and theories, the Twitter is 5050_books. And then you can also leave, obviously, comments on the YouTube or on Spotify or other things, or leave reviews, whatever. And I guess we'll see you next time.
Bye.